What is up, everybody, and welcome to the All-NBA Show, part of the All-City Podcast Network, powered by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook app. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com/All-NBA. I'm your host, Adam Mares. Legler has the day off. He is traveling south to his winter location. He will be back again tomorrow. I brought in my old buddy, my old pal, a guy I have podcasted with probably more than anybody else in the entire world. He is, of course, Matt Moore. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on. First time, long time.
First time, long time for sure. We have not done a show together about the Denver Nuggets in 3 months. So at the end of this show, we're going to talk a little Nuggets because the Nuggets are very interesting, even though they didn't play last night. But of course, we're going to lead the show with the 2 cup games, both of which were absolutely fantastic. Later in the show, Warriors Rockets. We're going to start with Hawks Knicks. But real quick, you could follow Matt Moore in all of his writing. He's a senior NBA writer at the Action Network. He hosts Locked On Nuggets. He hosts Locked On NBA, and he has a brand new Substack, Hardwood Paroxysm. His old name, people don't know this, Matt. You're one of the OGs of NBA blogging. You were doing this before the computer was invented.
It's true. Just like hammering it out with a chisel actually on stone and flinging it out to the public so that they could read my basketball scribblings.
It's true. So check all those things out. We'll have the links in the description and everything else. We got a lot to get to today, though, because we're going to try to pack in 3 different topics. Usually we just go to 2, but we're going to get 3 in today. And we're going to start in the East, where the my Atlanta Hawks took down your New York. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know if your team is the Knicks, but they took down the Knicks last night in very impressive fashion. I thought that was a game where if you just watched it, you have no context, you'd be like, you know what? The Hawks are the better team. They defended better. They made bigger plays, and they closed this one out in beautiful fashion. So first of all, what stood out when you watched this game?
A couple things. One, Dyson Daniels absolutely just locking up Jalen Brunson. I thought was really impressive.
That's the story.
Leads the league in steals. Phenomenal player. Like he's on all these highlight reels. Everyone's talking about the Great Barrier Thief, but to do that on that stage and to do it the way that he did to Brunson and to frustrate him so much. The second thing I kind of have is that I was really shocked that the Knicks were really bothered by the Hawks' physicality in the second half.
Yes.
Like they got into them, and the Knicks kind of were like, whoa, ease up, buddy, which is so different from how they were last year. And it wasn't Towns. Like Towns was the one that was ready to battle, but OG and Hart and Jalen and Mikal all were kind of like, this is a lot. Why are you guys being so physical with us? And the third thing, I am seriously wondering, Jalen Johnson, he's not going to have the box score stuff. He had a good box score night last night. Yeah, he did last night. But now every night, I really think Jalen Johnson is either the most important, best, or both player on the Hawks.
Oh, I don't even think that's necessarily controversial. I think Trae Young has been phenomenal this year. We're going to talk about him, but Jalen Johnson is a true running mate now for him and a guy that can do stuff. It's not just that he is the recipient of Trae Young's brilliance. He is creating his own stuff, and he's just such an all-around player. So you got a lot in there, but maybe the most interesting thing, and they're all interesting, is the physicality aspect, because the Knicks last year, first team all dog. That's how they made it as far as they did. That's how they won so many games. They had dogs on that team. And all of a sudden this year, you're right. Mikal Bridges, a really good player, does a lot of things well, can be a great defensive player. We've seen it, but not a dog defensively, which is you can be a good defensive player and not a dog. And I think he's a little bit of that. And you mentioned Karl-Anthony Towns, not one of those guys. I would say he played through it, but I think he's also a guy that if you said, how do you give him problems, you get physical with him. And even in that game, yes, he had some great plays. The dunk late in the game, the left-handed dunk, was an example of him overcoming the physicality, but I still think the writing is on the wall for that Knicks team. They had an identity last year that was, above all else, a bunch of dogs. And this year, an Atlanta Hawks team who was developing that identity just outbullied them. And I think if you're a Knicks fan, that part is enough of a trend that I would be concerned about it.
Yeah, I'd be worried too because and I think it's so fascinating, right? That because you assume that this is going to hold over. Like I was talking to a bunch of Knicks fans at the end of the run last year when they were so banged up versus the Pacers, and they were like, "Well, don't worry, because they'll get somebody this summer." And I was like, "Well, you're probably going to get Cat," and they were like, "No, they would never." And I was like, "What's CAA?"
Yeah.
And then, they do the Bridges trade. And the idea is just like, oh, but the core of you is still going to be the same. And it's like, no, when you have a team like that,
Yeah.
where it's not all coming from Jalen. Jalen's not this like monster defender. He's really good. He's awesome, but he's not this monster defender. You're built around this identity of like, no one's gonna outwork us, no one's gonna out hustle us, we're gonna beat you on the boards. When you mess with that, you come back as something different. And the Knicks
Yeah.
are gonna have to find a way to be successful as something different. You're just not gonna be that same team. And this year it's been like, yeah, we're like an extremely high powered offense. I just don't know how, like, if you're really like, yeah, we're going to have the best offense in the league and your plan is to use that to beat the Boston Celtics. Is that going to be the plan? Now there's time for them to evolve into something different, but that to
A
me
lot
is
of
kind of the
time.
lesson here is they got to evolve into something different by the time the playoffs come around.
And one of the fun questions, this is why basketball is the best. One of the questions you have is a lot of teams made little moves and it affected their identity in ways that it's like, okay, are we trying to now rediscover our old identity and just be back to that? We know who we are, who we're supposed to be. We got to be that. Or do you have to discover a new one? And I think in the Knicks' case, you're absolutely right. Karl-Anthony Towns changes who you are. You can't just say you're going to be the same team. He's good enough that he changes it in great ways, but he also has a profile of as a player that is going to be like, okay, but we can't expect certain things of him as well, or for the team to take on a certain identity. But I think the same is true of the Hawks, who did not
Yes.
make major changes in the offseason. And yet to me, they are a completely different team. And I mean, Dyson Daniels is my guy. I mean, I talk about him all the time. I love this dude. He's really the new piece. But to me, he unlocks a new Trae Young and he unlocks a new Hawks team that I think is so great. First of all, defensively, you need an elite defender around him. He's one of the best in the NBA. I think right now, it's funny. Nobody was saying that coming into the season, but I think already 23 games in, you say perimeter defenders, it's not a long list before you get to Dyson Daniels. He's that good and that disruptive of a player, in my opinion. But what he also is a connector. He makes such good plays off of a fulcrum piece like Trae Young. And when you add that, Jalen Johnson can do that. When you add enough of those guys, all of a sudden, you don't rely on Trae to do everything. Like the pass leaving his hand is an assist. The pass leaving his hand can lead to an assist. And to me, that's what makes this Hawk team different. And to Trae Young's credit, I know he takes a lot of flack and rightfully so for his style of play. This year, I feel like he's actually what he's supposed to be, a passer first and foremost, and a fulcrum first and foremost, but not a ball dominant guy where it's just like, all right, let's see what Trae does this time down the court. And I actually love watching him this year.
It feels like the scoring and the passing, and his shooting is still down, but it feels like a lot of that is complementary to this team rather than driving it. And like that to me is kind of the difference is if Trae is your whole team, if you make the whole team out of Trae, I think there's a very limited ceiling on what you can be. But if Trae is additive, is if he's multiplicative, then I think
Ooh.
you can go a lot further with what you can do. And adding Daniels is a lot. But the other thing, there was a sequence last night in the first quarter, Adam, where they send a hard double at Brunson and the rotation to the corner off of the one pass away. He was already, they were on a string already there. And I was like, I haven't seen the Hawks do that in like 5 years. Last night was the first time that I said, I wrote this down in my notes that I was like, this finally tonight looks to me the most like a Quinn Snyder team that I have seen, that they have bought into the principles, that they have bought into the connectedness. And like, that's going to take you far. If you buy into the right game plan, it's going to get you pretty far. And I feel like the Hawks are starting to do that.
So who gets credit for it? I mean, you mentioned Quinn Snyder. Do you think this is all a Quinn Snyder thing, or is it just sometimes pieces come together that make sense?
For me, I think it's Jalen's development and leap and
Well, yeah,
the
he's a
addition of
stud.
Dyson. Like, it's that combo to me that is what has changed it. Is like Dyson. I thought Jalen Johnson was like, I looked last year, I was like, yo, yeah, he's really good. And this year I was like, yeah, he's going to be like a really good player. I did not think that he would be this, where I'm like, it's not that he's scoring 40, but I'm watching how he's shaping the game. I'm watching how he's commanding the game
High
and
impact.
making those kinds of differences, high impact. And that to me is like really key. And you're seeing guys now fit around that. They're getting the best out of DeAndre Hunter. Bogdanovich has been great for them. They're getting better minutes out of Okongwu, who I thought really struggled last year. Capella's having a really great season, even though he's trade bait. He's having a really phenomenal season. Now, all that said, like you put it all together, and the resume is still like from a big picture metric standpoint, you step back and you're just like, okay, yeah, I don't know. But it's in the right direction. They're really fun. They've got a chance at the cup. And if they keep heading this direction, then those metrics will start to go the right direction too.
So it's so fascinating. You mentioned the trade piece of this because to me, the Hawks were like, you look at the start of the year and you go, okay, who are the trade teams? Brooklyn, Detroit has all that cap space so they can be involved in it. And Atlanta, you'd almost go in that order in terms of teams that are going to be involved in the trade market. And then you mentioned all the pieces that they have. Bogdanovich, DeAndre Hunter, who has that big contract but has underperformed. You look at all the different pieces and you go, Kongwu, maybe even Clint Capella. And now I look at it and I go, this team kind of makes sense. Even DeAndre Hunter's having a resurgence right now. He's playing phenomenally. He had 24 last night, hit 4 or 5 3-pointers, cut at the perfect time, just filled in the gaps, I thought, offensively perfectly. And all these guys that you thought were expendable, I look at it now and I go, they're coming together. It's December. I don't know what to make of them, but if I look at it right now, I go, do the Hawks need to make a trade? Or is this kind of a year where you kind of ride this wave that they're on?
I think it's about trying to get where do you want to go, right? Are you really just like let's see where we are? Then you can be patient. The one thing I would say is like don't trade Bogdanovich. Like that's the one that I would be like
having a down
because
year.
If you look when he comes back, that's when they start to improve. Like they're 8-4 when Bogdanovich is in the lineup and horrendous without him. Yeah. I also have this is like a really weird win profile, right? So like they're really fun and they're getting these big wins. They are 6-1 versus the Bucks, Celtics, Knicks, and Cavaliers.
Yeah,
they're 8.
Hey, that's who they're going to play in the playoffs.
And they're 8-11 versus everyone else, including the Wizards, 2 losses to them. So it's like they're a very inconsistent team, which you should expect for a young team developing. That's what I think kind of still makes the Trae Young piece kind of weird here. Is like, hey, we really got something here with like DeAndre and Jalen and Dyson, and maybe like Okongwu can be the guy for us in the future. They've kind of gone back and forth on that. Like we can really make something here. And Ricochet, right?
Yeah.
And then there's like Trae. And the question is just like, hey, if you move Trae and you just handed over the reins to the rest of these guys with like a competent point guard, what does that look like? And I think it's like an interesting question. It's not for sure that you should do that, but it's something I think you have to ask if you're the front office.
So here's what I think about the Hawks, and I really think this about the league at large. They're really good at the things that I think are very valuable right now. One is Trae is a really tough player to contain, and a lot of guard-to-guard screening or even guard-to-big screening, teams are going to have to trap or they're going to have to be able to switch those, and he's just really good at like wiggling out of that. The problem is you need a release valve, and they now have that. So they have the release valve guys that can make the play. So it makes Trae more difficult to contain, and when you do contain him, the release valve is going to give you something good. And then defensively, you need to have the versatility to do the exact opposite, be able to contain out on the perimeter. And they have enough guys to be pretty good at that, and it's making Trae Young valuable. So when you talk about, you're right, is this team young? Not really. They have a lot of young players, but some of their core guys, Bogdanovich, Trae, Clint Capella, are not young. But if you took Trae Young out of that, if you were saying like, okay, he's playing well, do you move on from him? I look at it and I go, yeah, but he's still the engine of that team in an important way. And if you replaced him with a guy that was less dynamic at that, all of these role players that are really good at doing stuff, like who are they doing that stuff for? So I don't know. They're in a weird spot where we're not buying them as contenders, but I am buying the form that they put together because I think they're good at something that's really important. And it's why a player like Jalen Brunson, who's really hard to contain, got completely contained last night.
Yeah, and they have like a lot of different options, right? Like, I've talked about that for years on Locked On Nuggets about the like problem solving in the playoffs, which is kind of what you want to get to. Now they got to get there, which I think that's the key is they got to find consistency. And that to me is the hang up here is you can't be a team that goes 6-1 versus all these great teams because we can realistically say like, are the Hawks better than the Cavaliers, the Celtics, and the Knicks? Like, no. Okay, no. So are you going to continue to win versus those teams? Probably not. And then once you have like a shaky up and down win profile, it's hard to make the postseason. And so then it's like, all right, but we don't even need to worry. Like, even if we don't make the postseason, we're just going to have a fun, good season. That's great. Yeah. Like, that's a good step in the right direction. But then eventually you are going to face that question of, all right, so is this still Trae's team? Are we still going forward with like Trae's the engine? Do we need it? Can you contain? Can you keep Trae limited to just this? Is he going to be happy with that? there's all these kind
He
of like
seems
political
happy.
questions. Yeah.
I mean, I think you have to give Trae. You're being a Trae skeptic here, and for rightfully so, because you're going on every other year of his career. But if you just go
Correct.
off of this last little bit, to me, he's playing the right way. And the other teams that they have had, I don't know that I could point to a year and be like, oh, he should have played the way he's playing now. I just feel like right now he has a team that demands something of him, and he's giving that.
I agree with that. And so it's like, let's take what we have in front of us for this season. Let's give where he's at now, and like people grow and mature, right? Like he may have just hit a new level. Like that's entirely possible. I think the other question here is always going to be money with Atlanta. Like it's just not a secret that they're deathly afraid of the tax. And so it's like, look, Dyson's playing himself into a big deal when he comes up. And, they've kept a lot of these guys and done a very good job of they've had a very successful balance of having guys that are good enough that you want to keep, but also not playing well enough to justify big contracts for them. So they've kind of managed that component of it, but I do think that that's going to come up pretty consistently as something they're going to have to solve for.
So you kind of just glossed over one of the big questions I wanted to ask you, which was, let's throw out the Celtics for a second, because the Celtics are the Celtics. But you said, oh, the Cavs and the Knicks, they're not going to beat them in a playoffs. Part of me goes, those two teams have an engine that is a crafty point guard that just beats everyone. But Dyson Daniels has shut them all down. And I look at this and I go, I'm not predicting. The playoffs are still 60 games away. But I look at it and I go, is there something to the matchup with the Knicks and with Cavs where I look at it and I go, the Hawks are kind of good against those teams for a reason?
Yeah, look, I think if the Hawks get in, I think they can be disruptive because this is like the exact kind of team that does that, right? It is the team with the inconsistent win profile that you overlook because you're like, well, they won 41 games. Like they're an 8 seed that had to beat this other squad to make the play-in tournament. Like, no, like there's no, this team isn't serious. And then you overlook them and then you get bit because they do have this combination of athleticism and perimeter defense along with offense and a big time guy that loves these kind of spots in Trae Young. Like that's a perfect recipe for what an upset would be. Like I'm not at all discounting that kind of idea. I just think that if you're the Hawks, you're, and this is like an interesting thing. I think if you're an NBA franchise, like, are you looking at this and being like, we've really got something here. How do we go from this to a contender, which is what everyone kind of does? Or is it, we've got something really good. Let's focus on being really good. And when we have to make tough decisions, we'll make them. But let's not get so far ahead, focused on a plan that's out of our control in a lot of ways. Let's just focus on being good right now.
Yeah, I think that's actually right. I'm enjoying this Hawks team, and like the NBA has moved on, and I think fans have moved on to this like title or bust thing, where the Hawks are an example of a team that's like, yeah, but can't we just enjoy this? They're fun. They're a really interesting team this year because they're the same but different in a way that's really, really compelling. Really quickly, I want to give a little bit of talk on the Knicks here. So my big question with the Knicks, because they're so obviously so impressive offensively, but I do wonder what their identity is. Who is their best player in tight spots, and where do they go? And here's a quote from Cat after the game that I find a little bit concerning. We might even have a graphic for it. I'm not sure. He says, obviously, we just want to be the best we can be. The Miami Heat, years ago with LeBron, it took a whole year for them before they figured it out. Kind of true. They went to the finals and lost, but kind of true. And put a banner up. Other teams, it took 75% of the season and they figured it out. You don't know. I don't have a crystal ball in front of me to tell you how long before things are clicking at a consistent level. And I just look at that one and I go, he's not wrong. But I think we're getting ahead of ourselves and we're comparing ourselves to the Miami Heat right now. And those are the types of things I look at. He's not wrong that a team like the Knicks should be expected to have a little bit longer of a runway than, say, the Boston Celtics, who are bringing back the same team. You say, okay, this team is going to have to figure some things out. But at the same time, there's something I just don't like about that quote.
Is it that it came from Karl Anthony Towns? I think that's the starting place for why.
I think there's part of it.
Look, the way to think about this is like modify it slightly. If Towns had said like, look, I'm not LeBron and Jalen's not LeBron and neither of us is Dwayne Wade, but that was a team that was better than us and it took them time to figure it out.
Yeah.
You feel different about it. It's that direct comparison where you're like, do you really think you're at this level? And this is the thing is I've always felt this way is Towns, I feel, is always trying to fake a level of greatness. That it's like if you act like you're this good, you'll be that good.
Yeah.
And that's been a consistent kind of thing. Like he and KG, like KG mentored him his first season in Minnesota before the owner had a falling out with KG again. And so like there was a lot of that. And like I do wonder a lot of this is just like is how much KG like Towns took the wrong way of like
Oh,
KG when he was like, I hate you. Like Towns is like, oh, okay, so act like you hate them. And KG's like, no, I hated them, and like that level of intensity. And I think this has always been like how Towns is trying. Now I think he's gotten closer every single year.
could
I
be.
think he's gotten closer to like where he needs to be every year. And I also think that this for him, I think is he's so uncertain. Like I was really impressed with how he played last night because he was the most engaged Nick on the floor.
All
And
year, honestly, he's been good. Like this has been a
yeah,
very
he's
good
been
year
great.
for him.
And he's in a very new situation that he didn't ask for, and he wasn't happy about this outcome, but he's really working to make the best of it. So with Towns, I always kind of come back to that, which is if you get past the execution, the intent is good with Towns and the talent is there. And that
Yeah.
combination, I think, means that you're probably like, there's a good chance it will at least head in a positive direction more than a negative one.
Well, the other thing about the quote that bothers me is they have a 120.2 offensive rating. Usually, when you say like our chemistry or this or that, you're thinking like, how does the offense go? It's their defense that has to improve here. And that's why that quote to me is just a little bit strange. And like I said, the Knicks, I don't know where to place them because at the moment, I'm just not buying them. I think they're going to be fine. I think they're going to be good, but I'm not fully buying them as this contender because I'm not buying their defense. And, we'll see how it goes. Really quickly, Hawks Bucks is coming up. Number 10 offense in the Bucks versus the number 20 offense in the Hawks. 14th defense from the Bucks versus the 18th. So the Bucks have a better offense and defense. Where I think the Hawks have a chance in that game. They're number 5 in fast break points, where the Bucks allow a lot of fast break points, and the Hawks number 2 at points in the paint. The Bucks pretty good at guarding points in the paint. And then I look at it and I say, all right, I just said Dyson Daniels can guard, the Cavs. He can guard the Knicks. That's some good point guards. Can he guard Damian Lillard? That's going to be another interesting test if he and that team collectively can do it. So what do you like about this matchup? Just real quick.
Yeah, so I think some base stuff from when they face off in the playoffs. Trae's going to eat up the drop coverage from Brook Lopez. He always does that. Like that's a very good spot for him. The transition point, I think, is really where it's like real. That's so important because that's how they're going to beat you. Is the Bucks are very old, and so if you just use those young legs, you saw it last night. Jalen Johnson and Dyson Daniels and Okongwu getting up and down the floor using the athleticism. If you can out athleticism the Bucks, they get really spooked because they're supposed to have that edge with Giannis. I don't know how they're going to slow down Giannis. I don't know how that's going to go. And the Bucks are a lot sharper in execution, I think, on both ends of the floor. But I do think the Hawks have a puncher's chance just because they are able to play with so much more energy than Milwaukee sometimes able to muster.
You haven't thought about this, but the NBA Cup, the Bucks are the old heads, but then you have a bunch of Gen Z teams. The Rockets, the Hawks, and the Thunder are the Gen Z team. So kind of like last year where we saw New Orleans and we saw Indiana in it. This tournament, 2 years in a row so far, the only 2 years it's happened, has kind of been a showcase for the up-and-coming teams, which I kind of think is cool. I actually like that about it.
I think it's ideal.
Yeah. All right, let's take a break. On the other side, we're going to get to the other game that happened out in the West that had a very controversial finish. That is, of course, the Warriors and the Rockets. Steve Kerr had a lot to say. We're going to break down the controversy as well as give the Rockets a lot of shine because they deserve it. First, get ready to tackle the NFL and NBA action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you got a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com/AllNBA to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com/AllNBA. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older and present in Colorado. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expires 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. And if you have a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-522-4700. Let's talk about goals for a minute. How are you tracking with the ones you set for your business earlier this year? We have a lot of small business owners that are watching this show. If you don't know why you've hit them, you need constant contact. You have year-end goals. Constant Contact has what it takes to help you meet them faster. No matter how experienced you are with digital marketing, Constant Contact has the tools to make your marketing run smoother. Sell more, raise more, and build more genuine relationships with your audience with Constant Contact's suite of digital marketing tools, all made to fast-track your success. Tap email marketing that helps you create and send the perfect email to every customer. Own the smartphone by adding texting to your marketing strategy. Connect with over 2 billion people on social media with an all-in-one tool for posting and sharing. And sell more online in less time with Constant Contact's powerful e-commerce tools. Get all the automation, integration, and reporting tools that get your marketing running seamlessly. Join the thousands of businesses and millions of people who trust Constant Contact with their marketing success. Time to put the go in your 2024 business goals with email, social, SMS, and customized marketing campaigns built for you in just a few clicks. So ready, set, go to constantcontact.com/allcity to start your free trial today. That's constantcontact.com/allcity for your free trial. All right, back here, second segment. I'm with Matt Moore, and we are now going to go to the Western Conference, where the Rockets got a controversial win. Maybe not so controversial, but maybe very controversial, depending on who you ask, over the Golden State Warriors. So we'll break down the controversy first. Well, first of all, the Rockets had a 15-game losing streak against the Warriors. I want to circle back to that because I sometimes think those types of things are very meaningful. This was a dogfight. The officials had swallowed their whistles for this one. Both teams very, very good defensively. Both teams very physical, and this game was incredibly physical. In the clutch, you got a huge three from Pods, you got a huge three from Kuminga, and you got a huge three from Fred VanVleet. The Warriors have the ball. Clock's winding down. There's a 3-second differential on the game clock and shot clock. Yet Steph Curry goes early and takes a three with 10 seconds to go. Very strange decision. There's chaos for the rebound. Fred VanVleet jumps on Gary Payton II's back. No call. Ball kind of fumbles out to the top of the key. And then Bill Kennedy calls a loose ball foul on the Warriors. I think it was a crazy call in that moment. It really kind of decided the game, although the Warriors, who knows if they would have ended up winning that game or not. There was a lot of crazy things happen there, but I thought it was a bad call to make in that moment, especially when you go to the review and I was like, kind of a foul? Not really. More of just two guys going for the ball. What did you make of the controversy?
I thought it was a foul among many. I just thought like that last sequence was so like chaotic. It's like, that's a foul and that's a foul and that's a foul. And you know why we don't call it? Because it's basketball. Like, it's fine. Yeah. And I don't think that the call should have been made. It also felt very much to me like this was an insane scramble for the ball with multiple guys on the floor. We've got to call something. I don't have a view of a clear jump ball, so I'm going to call this. Like, that's what it felt like. And it's rare because usually they're just like, jump ball. And they went the other way and we're like, foul. And for it to decide free throws for the lead for a cup game,
for the
money on the line.
Too. Yeah.
Like,
crazy.
Yeah. That's a really rough way to lose. At the same time, like, I thought the Warriors got pretty soundly outplayed, except for basically like that third quarter run. And so it's like, if you look at the kind of the overall, what did the game look like? Very much in favor of the Rockets. And it's not surprising but they were down 7 late and the Warriors offense fell apart. I understand, Kerr's flipping out over a bunch of calls this year, had one in Denver too. But I do think that overall, like, pretty impressed with the Rockets defense, and that the Warriors do not look like the Warriors almost ever. And I still maintain this, like, they don't know who they are. And when you don't know who you are, it's very hard for you to execute, I think, late. And I think we're seeing that pretty consistently.
Man, I think I disagree with you on the Warriors. I think they know who they are. I just don't think they have they don't have enough offensive talent for the clutch. Because to me, that's what it is they play incredible defense like the old Warriors. They're just very physical, very active. I mean, here's one cool thing about the Cup. Rockets, Thunder, even the Warriors, like the teams that have advanced, the Hawks, they all have really good team defense, guys that are rotating behind. And it's kind of cool to see the teams that are succeeding right now are the teams that are doing the thing that we think is so important to the NBA. And I think the Warriors provide that. And then the ball pops for them. They get open shots. The difference is the Warriors in their heyday were an elite clutch time. In fact, at their absolute apex, there was nobody better in the clutch than them. And this year, they're pretty bad in the clutch. And that's why this game is so tough. They're 25th in offensive rating in the clutch. In that game, they only had 7 points in the final 5 minutes, including turnovers. Now, the Rockets only had 9 points. That's how ugly the game was. But they got a bucket from Kuminga and got a bucket from Pods. I talk about those big shots. Those were the only shots they hit. They did make one free throw. And to me, I think they're the Warriors for 42 minutes, I think they look like the old Warriors. It's the last 6 where you look at it and go, man, they have a hard time game after game closing those.
I think defensively they're different, but they at least have an identity and they know what they're supposed to do, and that's what makes them very good. So like on that end, I get you. But on the offensive end, a lot of this is like Kuminga is an up and down north-south player. Like Gary Payton talked about this the other night about how important it is to get Kuminga going downhill.
Yeah.
The Warriors offense is not a downhill oriented thing. It is very much a motion offense. It is very much in, out, up, down, left, right. Like it's a joystick in terms of where that ball can move. And it's a lot different. And we see these situations late in these games where before the ball would always find Curry and sometimes it doesn't. Or sometimes it does find him and he's just like locked up without an ability to get the shot off. Maybe that's just, Steph's getting up there. And so maybe that's part of that equation too. But when I watch them offensively, they don't have the same chemistry, synergy, and connection that they used to, in part because I think that the new players are just a little bit different from the guys that they had. And Draymond and Steph, I think, are still trying to play the same way that they've always played, which is where I think that Klay Thompson absence, even if it's not about Klay making shots, just about his presence not being there, I think has them a little off a little bit, and that's why they don't look like the Warriors to me.
Let me see here. They had 21 turnovers. That seems like the Warriors, no?
Yeah,
I thought I was going to let you bring that up because I know that's your corner. But one last thing on the officiating, and then I want to give the Rockets a lot of shine because I like talking about the winner more than the loser. I like Billy Kennedy. He might be my favorite official. I like him a lot. And I think that with these reviews, they're so boring and they take time. I don't even mind that he adds a little texture to his reviews, and everybody knows he kind of flares them up a little bit for the dramatic. When he had to go to do the flagrant review with 3 minutes and 30 seconds to go, all I kept thinking was, not now, Billy Kennedy, not now. Second quarter, third quarter review, 10-point game, have some fun, go crazy. Right now, when everyone is mad, because that was a really, really, really physical game. From the first quarter all the way to the end, it was a physical game. Emotions are on edge, and that call was going to really affect the outcome. And I'm sitting here thinking, Billy Kennedy, don't do it. He, of course, does it. It was fine. But then when you get to a controversy at the end, it almost like becomes part of the story. And I feel it's just a little note here. I like Billy Kennedy, but I feel like there's a time and a place for him for his theatrics.
Maybe at the same time, it's like he's just delivering it. So it's like the calls are the calls, and people are going to be mad about
delivering it. He's
yeah,
just delivering it.
Yeah. And so, hey, you can deliver it. You can deliver
on the floor is overturned. Like, come on, man.
Yeah,
save that for the fun times.
Hey, look, if you're delivering flowers, you can be like, "Here are your flowers," or you can be like, "Here are your flowers," and that's like the same thing.
I keep calling him Billy Kennedy. I don't know why. It is Bill Kennedy. All right, let's go to the Rockets though, because I love this team. I really, really love this team. Watching Draymond Green guard Şengün, I thought to me was absolute theater because it's almost like all these young up-and-coming centers have to go through the Draymond experience. And usually it'll happen in the playoffs, and maybe we'll get that. And I thought last night was Şengün's Draymond experience. I didn't think he was necessarily great. I thought he was very good. I mean, his numbers 26, 11, and 5 with 3 steals. Very good. But I actually thought he got flustered, but I was still impressed with how he played. It was almost like that was his first time, not necessarily winning the fight with Draymond, but holding his ground against Draymond, which to me, it feels like an important it just feels like an important moment in a meaningful game. So last night, I just thought that matchup was great. And I actually thought Şengün did a great job, given the fact that he knew he wasn't going to get a foul call in the fourth quarter.
I thought he was really good until that late stretch where you mentioned he got flustered when Draymond amped it up, when he turned it up before that foul, really, the big flagrant foul. So I watched the game last night on TNT overtime. And when you do that, you get the behind the basket look, so you get a different look at the physicality, which is really great. And you also get the shots on the bench. And watching Şengün after Draymond had shut him down like 3 times, after he tried a bad dribble move, that was a turnover, got stoned in the post, and he goes over and he slumps. And you're right, Şengün's got this look on his face like, God, this guy.
He needs to be less expressive. This is a weird take. I actually think it's part of it. Draymond on his podcast always talks about guys you can rattle, this or that. And I don't know if guys are more or less rattled by Draymond. He gets really physical, does some crazy stuff, but guys are certainly more or less expressive. And Şengün's very expressive.
Yeah. And once he smells
Yeah,
blood, he's all over you.
he's all over it.
Um, and so it was really great. But the other thing that kind of ties into this, you talked about how much you like this Rockets team. I had heard that Jabari Smith was this like really great locker room guy, and I was like, really? Because he's like even with Jalen Green struggles, Jabari's the one that has really been the biggest disappointment from a draft perspective. And I really loved his game as a prospect and think he
Still
can
do.
still be good eventually. But it makes perfect sense why you hear he's like the locker room guy when you watch this TNT overtime feed. His communication with
Ooh.
guys, because he's the one that went over to Şengün and was like tapped him on the chest and was like, "Hey, it's all right. Stay locked in. Don't get off kilter. Don't get flustered." And then Jalen Green hits those free throws, and Jabari's like up off his feet, slamming his hand into his chest, being like, "That's what we do." And it was like really cool to see those dynamics play out for this
Love it.
Rockets team because they've got such a great mix of guys. You got Dylan the villain, you got Fred VanVleet, you've got
Yeah.
Şengün who's like very mild mannered. You've got Jalen who still kind of wants to be the guy. You've got Jabari. You have all these really great personalities on this team, and they're all combining into this team that is so fierce and so obnoxious to play. And Udoka's edge really kind of carries through on the court. Like I think there's a lot of things about with Udoka that make it kind of complicated. You're always on a razor's edge, I think, with him, but it is working, and they're a really fun watch every single night.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Jabari because to me, he's kind of a sneaky key to them. And they are 12-2 when he scores 10 points or more. That's a low bar. 10 points is not a lot of points, but they need his score. I mean, last night they won the game 90-1-90, and they got the foul calls at the end. They almost lost the game 90-89, which just shows you they're a phenomenal defense. But what are they going to be on offense? And you just need some contributors here and there to fill in the gaps. You got Şengün, you've got Fred VanVleet. Every now and then you have Jalen Green. You just need the other guys to pour in enough shot making. And last night he did that throughout the game. And that number to me means something. 12-2 when he scores 10 points and 5-6 when he doesn't. It means he had 11. He has 14 games with 10 points and 11 games without it. To me, that's like a really nice bellwether for whether or not the Rockets are going to be good.
Yeah, and the small ball look that he provides them is really effective because they're so physical, right? Like sometimes these teams try and emulate small ball and it doesn't work because they don't have any physicality to go with it. And the Rockets bring physicality when they go to those units. I really want to see Jabari with like a high volume passer who's like a really, really great pure point type of guy, because that's what I really envision him as a prospect was like, oh man, he's going to kill people with a David West pick and pop to 18 feet. Like he's just going to kill teams.
Like swap him and Ricochet. You think he would look really good next to Trae? Yeah, I think you're right.
I think he would look really good in Atlanta. And so like that combination I think is really good. Their offense overall, is going to be hit and miss this season. This is one of the things I have from a betting perspective, I'm doing that stuff over at Action. Like this has been, every time I looked at the Rockets, I was like, who would I bet? Who would I bet for Cup MVP? Like who's their guy? And I know it's like, well, look, Şengün had 26, 11, and 5. There's a lot of nights when Şengün has really good numbers, and I'm just like, I didn't really notice him that much. But there's nights when he's phenomenal and he really controls the game. They have guys that can do it, but I still kind of wonder about their hierarchy of how to figure that out as the season goes along.
It's a strength and a weakness, right? Because there's so many good players that I agree with you. It'd be really hard for the Rockets to have an MVP because they just get contributions from so many guys. Amen Thompson, another guy I just absolutely love. Tari Eason, I absolutely love. I mean, we've talked a lot about them. Let's go to Jalen Green, though, because he is another one that's so fascinating. Not a player I love, but, he goes 5 of 15 last night. And if you only watch the second quarter, you'd be like, well, that's their MVP. This guy's incredible. He gave them some minutes in the second quarter that were so important to their success. 4 of his 5 baskets came in that quarter. 3 of his 4 assists came in that quarter. He also had 3 I think maybe 4 of his 5 assists. I don't remember what it was. And then 3 turnovers also came. He had a really bad 2-minute stretch within a good 8-minute stretch. And Jalen Green, if you just watch that part, you'd be like, I get it. That is their secondary fulcrum that can come in those staggered lineups and do something for you. And that gives them this dynamic look. But he's, of course, very inconsistent. His good plays are so phenomenal. But that second quarter, again, I didn't like first, third, or fourth quarter from him. But that second quarter you watch and you go, man, that's such a good player. And I feel like that's how I feel about Jalen Green.
This sounds like such a massive insult, and it's not. David Ramil talked to me about this about a couple of years ago, and Heat fans or Rockets fans lost their minds. I just think that the future for Jalen Green is he's going to win a 6 man of the year eventually. I love him as a 6 man, right? Microwave score off the bench,
Yeah.
come off, athleticism, firepower, some playmaking, not a horrible defender, puts the effort in, all those types of things. It's when you try and make him the 1A, night to night, quarter to quarter, possession to possession, that I just don't buy in, that I'm like, I don't see that for him. And he's
Yeah.
a good passer, but not an elite one. He hasn't been a good enough shooter. Like his whole game was always predicated upon his scoring ability. And so even if he's a better defender than maybe he could have been, and he's a better passer than maybe you would think, it doesn't matter if he's not going to be able to do the one thing, because that's the thing the Rockets need most. And you see this success when he brings it, but he's not a guy I think that will ever get to the point where he can be that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he becomes that with
Yeah.
Houston or with somebody else. But that's where I'm at right now. Is I think he has a long future in the league. He's going to make a lot of money, but
The
I do
promise
not see
is
him as like the guy. Right. Right.
Yeah, I mean, his dunk he had in that second quarter where he's so quick. His first step can be
Yeah.
so quick. It's almost like you have to learn with those tools almost how to focus them more narrowly, because if you're
Yeah.
just trying to like freelance it or something, but when you focus it to know that first step is your move, get to the rim and explode. Those are the things, he can be great. But that mold of player, I think, takes the longest, especially when they get drafted at 19 years old. It just takes a long time for all of it to come, all that talent to come together. And I hope it does because I like good players. Real quick, Dylan Brooks had a great quote after the game that I love. He says, the guys that came to Houston, me, Fred, and Ime, showed a different brand of basketball, and it's fun to play. It's contagious for the rest of the guys, even if they're not that type of player. Very interesting. It shows that even if you're not shooting the ball well and turning the ball over, missing plays, you can rely on your defense. And he's talking about the toughness of their defense here, and he's talking about the identity. And I'm going to tell you this, Matt, the more I watch basketball, there's a lot of different ways you can win. I don't think you can judge every team by one standard. There's boxes you have to check, but teams can do it differently. Knowing what your identity is, accepting it, to me is one of the most underrated things of basketball. And I agree with Dylan Brooks in what he says. They brought him, Fred VanVleet, and Ime, and probably in equal measure, brought an identity to the team. And even the guys that don't fit that identity are buying into it. And I think it's been rewarding. Like the guys have enjoyed it. And I just think that finding and setting a cultural identity within a team is just so valuable in the NBA. And the teams that are good seem to really understand what their identity is and where every piece of the puzzle fits into that.
Playing hard-nosed defense and losing is miserable. It's
Yeah.
miserable. You're physically taxed, you're exhausted, and you're like, what am I doing this for? But playing great physical defense, team defense, and everyone sharing the ball and not necessarily being in line behind one guy is really rewarding. You feel like you get opportunities to show what you can do. You get to feel like you're contributing to the team's success and you're not just riding coattails and you're winning. And so that combination is like really what drives it. And it's really great because it's the process drives success and the success reinforces the process. And like that whole cycle, I think, is really important for building a really good team. You talked about like knowing who you are. I think it's got to be so difficult if you don't know that when you're in the NBA and you're just like every night, you're like, who are we going to be tonight? What do I need to be tonight? What's my job? What do I need to be a scorer? Do we need to defend? Are we running up and down? The consistency across the 82 games is so key. And that's where I think the identity reinforces everything so that you know not just who you guys are. That's very ephemeral. It's more literal of like, I know what my job is. I know what I have to do in the bar I have to reach with my effort.
So we get Rockets Thunder. That's the number 1 defense in the Thunder versus the number 2 defense in the Rockets. You get the number 8 offense in the Thunder versus the number 15 offense in the Rockets. Both teams force you to shoot terribly. That's part of what the secret sauce is. And then the Thunder are number 1 in not turning the ball over. Houston forces about an average amount of turnovers. Houston is number 7 in not turning the ball over. OKC forces the most by far of any team. The one area Houston has an advantage is they offensive rebound the ball. Oklahoma City is 28th in offensive rebound percentage, although I think some of that probably has to do with the moment where they didn't have a center. The 2-week stretch they didn't have one. But the big story here is number 1 defense versus number 2 defense. This game already was 91-90. I am so excited to find out how this game is officiated. I want to see how the teams overcome the defense because this has all the markings of an absolute playoff look and atmosphere with physicality and just impressive defense. That's my take on that game. What do you think?
If we get the wrong crew, this game is going to take 7 hours to complete because they are so physical, so Hopefully they stay out of it and we just get this great defensive battle. You mentioned the OKC turnover percentage on opponents. You actually didn't go far enough. They are the number one turnover percentage for the opponent since 2000. No team has turned their opponent over.
Who was it in 2000?
I think it was the Nets was the team that it was. I'm not sure why,
Okay,
but that's what I looked at. So, I mean, like their steal rate is incredible. And I was watching that Mavericks game, and it's not like, I'm always focused in on stuff like, oh, they're able to do this in the pick and roll or what. It's just like random possessions. The Thunder just take the ball from you. And so you better have great ball security. They do. And they battle for every single possession. They fight for every single possession. Both of these teams do. And that's going to be, I think, what's going to be really interesting. Hartenstein versus Şengün is what I'm really looking at. That's a really good matchup for OKC. But it's also like, if you're the Rockets, he's not going to get beaten up there. So Şengün's going to have opportunities. That, I think, is going to be what's going to determine this game, because I think Şengün's going to need a monster game if they're going to get past OKC.
You get the Canadians, Dylan Brooks and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as well, which is always fun. So I think this NBA Cup, I have my complaints with it, namely the court. I know this is like old news, but even watching last night, I'm like, these games are so good, and I hate that I'm going to be seeing the highlights all year of the stupid looking courts, especially the red one, which absolutely kills me. But nonetheless, the Cup has been a hit. 2 years in a row, the games have actually been good. Nobody's watching, and there's a lot of weird gimmicks around it. But me, as a super fan watching these games, I'm just like, man, this is way higher level basketball than we usually get in December, and I'm appreciative of it. All right, let's move on now to talk about the Nuggets here in our final 10 minutes. Matt, so people that don't know, Matt and I did a show together for I don't know how many years, a lot of years, four years or something like that, covering the Denver Nuggets. And every single year, I was higher on the Nuggets than Matt Moore was. Always higher. Until this year, when I quit the show, you're still doing it, and automatically you picked them to win the title in a year where I actually was pretty skeptical of them. So why did you pick them to win the title at the beginning, and what part of your prediction has played out the way you thought? The team looks like what you were expecting, and what parts has it not?
So for me, it's about the difference in what April is like versus October. And what we do as sports fans is we imagine this is the team, and they'll be this team the whole year, and then they will face off in the playoffs, and everything will be exactly the same as it is now. And after doing this long, I'm just like, that's not how it is at all. Like,
how many teams are there? Every team is how many teams? Don't you have a thing where it's like 4 teams or something, or 5?
You're at least 3 different teams throughout the season, and sometimes you're 4 or 5. And this Nuggets team, I think, has been already, 2. I think there's already been 2 versions of the Nuggets in 2 months. They're on pace for like 8 different versions of themselves. And one of the things I said was they're going to be like, I don't think they're going to be good in the beginning of the year, and I don't think they have been. And I think the record is not indicative of where this team is at. But I said by the end of the year, I think that they will have figured out enough by simple necessity that when we get in the playoffs, it's who do you want? If I give you, it's no longer about can you win 4 rounds. It's okay. If I give you Jason Kidd and Luka Doncic, or Michael Malone and Nikola Jokic, who do you want? I want Jokic. I got you Mark Daigneault and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, or Michael Malone and Nikola Jokic. I want Jokic, etc. And certainly team strength has a lot to do with that. It can't just be the best player, which is really what drives the most of it. But I do have some belief that they'll be able to figure out something by the time that we get there. The question is going to be whether they can or not, because they have limited themselves so much in what they're able to do. So that's really kind of the idea, is that whatever the Nuggets turn out to be through what's going to be a pretty miserable and difficult path to the playoffs, that they'll get there. And once they're there, I'm still going to want that team because of how they're built and because of Jokic.
So you're doubling down a little bit. You're saying you still see it with them. What's the most concerning thing about what you're seeing from them right now?
They lost to the Wizards. That is probably the most concerning thing imaginable.
I saw that one coming a mile away, man. I even reached out to my Wizards buddy and told him, I was like, I think the Nuggets lose to the Wizards tonight.
That's a great call by you. I was like, surely not. I think probably the most concerning thing is I don't think the team is connected. I don't think that they are together. And you and I have talked about this. Like, I just do not think that they are in the right place from a mental, emotional standpoint, which does matter. I do all this stats work, and I do all this film work, and I do all this other stuff, And then it's like, yeah, but at the end of the day, these are human beings, and these things about team sports, about how you play together, I think matter. And I wrote about this over at, I've got a new Substack called the Denver Dig, which is just Nuggets focused. I wrote about how the solution can't be, we got to do this. We were letting Nikola down. We've all got to play better for Nikola because he's doing so awesome. He's having the best season in NBA history so far, period. End dot. No question. This is the best season so far by any player in NBA history. But you can't get there by being like, we have to do it for Nikola. We have to. Everyone's got to do it for each other. And if they can rediscover that, that's step one. Finding anyone who can make a 3-pointer is step two. And then I guess like finding someone who is large and can grab a basketball on the defensive end is probably 3.
Is it weird that I'm not that concerned about the 3-point shooting? Because to me, I think it's the other stuff that you're talking about. For me, number one, you didn't even mention Jamal Murray. To me, Jamal Murray is number one. We don't have to talk about it. We all know that Jamal. By the way, who was it the other day? Somebody, Lou Williams, when somebody said, "What's wrong with Jamal?" and he goes, "This is just who he is. He's always been this guy. What are we talking about? Other than a few times in the playoffs." And I hate it, but he's not necessarily wrong. I do think Jamal Murray can be a lot better, and I think that's number one. I think the connectedness to me is number two, and you could even make the argument number one. Maybe it stems from the Jamal piece, but does the team look like it's rowing in the same direction, knows what they are? The young guys that they brought in, do they understand where they fit into that equation? I would say absolutely not at the moment. The 3-point shooting to me is such a distant third, and the reason is Denver has the number 6 offense. They do a great job of generating consistent offense that just doesn't involve a ton of 3-pointers, and they've proven that they can win that way. So I do think it's an issue, and if you play a Celtics team and you look bad, you're going to lose by 30 points. But I also think that if you play well, their ability to score inside the 3-point line is super valuable, especially late in games, and it's one of the reasons that they give teams such a hard time. So I'm not as worried about it. It is a concern, but I would put it so distant behind those other two.
The answer is not bombing away from 3, like just throwing up 3-pointers to get your 3-pointers up. The problem is that in every game, they don't have to shoot more threes if they don't allow as many as they are. And they don't have to allow as many. They don't have to allow less if they're shooting more. But every game, they're allowing a huge number of attempts and trying a tiny one. Yeah. And so when you get in that situation, there is a point where, and like, I know how much like this, it's annoying. I get it, but the math does become inescapable that it's like, yeah, no, you played really well. You shot 55% from the field, but you lost by 15 because they made 5 more threes. Like that's it. That's what happens. You have to make up for that so much. And I will also say this. I don't think they're as good of a rebounding team as they have been in the past, like 2 years ago. I think that slipped. The other thing is that they're one of the worst.
You think Aaron Gordon will fix this? Aaron Gordon will fix some of the rebounding?
Some. The points in the paint is actually the other thing here that they're getting killed at. So it's like, look, if you're allowing a huge amount of threes and a lot of points in the paint, guess what? You're like, yeah, congratulations on preventing their mid-range shots that they take, but you're going to need to do something else here. They've just got to do a better job. And for me, honestly, a lot of it is, I think the points in the paint is fine if they were to get the amount of 3-pointers down. I'm writing a big thing over at Paroxysm about the Celtics and about how we're going to have to start rethinking defense, because the Celtics, there's all these things about the 3-pointer, quote unquote, breaking the NBA. And people talked about it with the Rockets and the Warriors. And that wasn't really true. The Celtics really are doing it, because right now the Celtics are like, we're not even playing well. We're just literally out mathing you because you're not willing to change how you defend. And so we're going to have to change that. And I think the Nuggets are a key member of that, where it's like, you have to defend the 3-point line first and stop worrying about the rim as much.
I think your point about Jokic earlier, the one guy that knows this very thoroughly is Jokic. I mean, when they lost, I can't remember what game he had. He said asked him about his patience, and he said, "I'm part of the team, not separate from them." So it's not that they lost and I didn't. He's like, I'm part of the problem. Like, I have to figure out how to make my game work given what our roster is. So I don't think this is a Jokic thing. It maybe is a narrative outside the team thing, but I will say, we've been covering this guy for 11 years together, Matt. The guy has for 11 years gotten better, and I have no idea how, because I just thought last year, the year before, were the top level, the top floor, and yet this year he's definitively more dominant. And it's like, if Jokic was the Jokic of 2021 even, or 2020, I'd be like, this team has no hope of anything. They're just not a good team and they're not going to get done. But Jokic has been so dominant that it does leave the door open. They have so many problems, so much to figure out. But I just watch him will them to wins night after night. And I go, I don't know, man. And it feels like LeBron back with those Cavs teams where you're like, I don't think they're a champion, but they got LeBron. So I don't know. That's how I feel about Jokic.
Yeah, I mean, it's we asked this question on Locked On NBA. I was talking to Blackburn about it, about Ryan Blackburn. I asked, I was like, what if he just does win a title by himself? Like what if he just does it? Like, it's just God. And like, there would obviously be contributions from other guys, but
you mean at the degree to the contribution? It's not like
yeah,
this. It's just like, okay,
because
he's 80% of it, 90%.
one of my favorite stats is like your usage rate can't be that high and win a title. And there's a very chicken and the egg thing here where your usage is high because your team isn't good enough, so you're doing more. But also by you doing more, you're taking away from team contributions, which makes you worse. Jokic raises everybody up and is doing so amazing at it. He's elite from everywhere. He's shooting 55% from mid range and 50% from three. I
Do you
don't
see
know
the
what
number that he leads the league in heaves and is still leading in second 3-point percentage? If you took away the heaves, it goes up higher.
It's unbelievable. Every single year we're like, well, he can't get better. And then he does. He just gets better. Yeah. And I asked him in the press conference the other day I asked Jamal and him the same question about him scoring more. And Joker in very Joker-ness was like, I don't know. I mean, my 3-pointer's going in. That's probably it. But Jamal's like, he's being aggressive. Like he's attacking. He knows he can attack these coverages one-on-one. And if they cover him one-on-one, he's going to attack it. And that used to be a kind of a problem for him, that he would kind of overthink of it, where he'd be like, well, okay, I've got a guy one-on-one, but what if there is a pass that's open? Versus now he's like, oh, you're one-on-one? I'm scoring right now every time. And so the combination of it, like, again, no player in NBA, I looked this up, and at first I was like, oh, the first 19 games. And I was like, nobody has as many points, rebounds, and assists in a 19-game span. And then I was like, well, wait, what if we just take it at any point in a season? No player has a 19-game span where they've had this many points, this many rebounds, this many assists, ever. Yeah. Nobody's ever done it. And I just, it's insane. But I'll also tell you this, your favorite term, the net rating, a little bit down, a little bit behind the other guys because of the team. And that's like, he is doing everything he can to put them at that kind of elite level.
Oh, you're saying his net rating is down compared to like Shea or something? Yeah. I mean, it's not down that much. It's what is he, plus 11? That much. Plus 12 or something like that? I mean, it's 10.2 now. 10.2. And that's without 2 starters for a good portion of it. All right, points per game in October, 31.5. Points per game in November, 29. Points per game in December, 39.5. What is his points per game in January, February, March combined? Like, is this he's riding an aggressive streak, but he's going to scale back? Or is Yoke the new 30-point per game scorer?
I'll say he goes back to 28. I'll say he goes back.
28 would still be a career high. I think his career high is 27.5 or something.
And that's the key, is I think he is so locked in, because honestly, if you look at it, his rim percentage, a little bit down.
Yeah.
Look, like, that's what's
a lot
crazy.
Down, a lot
he
down.
Could be, and like, as his rim percentage increases, the 3-pointer will fall off, and that will kind of counterbalance and even out. But his understanding of when and how to score, and his willingness to do so, like, he's understanding that this is what he has to do. And so I honestly think that with this team, that's what he is needed of him, and he will do what is needed.
The MVP thing, I don't love it, but one thing I will say is, Mavs fans can stop yelling at me. This is my take. If the Nuggets are not a top 3 seed, I actually think that they should go with historical precedent and not give it to him. The year he won it, when they were below that, to me, it was like a 1-game difference between 3rd and 5th or wherever they were. Nobody else had really stood out. Like, there was some exceptions to that year. I think this year, though, it is important for the Nuggets to win for him to be able to receive a 4th one. But that being said, 2nd in the NBA in 3-point percentage on volume, averaging a triple-double, 2nd in scoring per game, number 1 in rebounding. I just look at it and I go, if you're top 3, I'm sorry, this is his best season he's ever had, and he's had some of the best seasons in the history of the game, and this one's above all. So to me, the MVP thing is very simple for me for Yoke. If his team gets to the top there, I think he's probably going to win it. If he doesn't, I don't think he should even be eligible for it personally, but that's kind of my take.
I have him number 1 right now, and I was like, you cannot have anybody else. I also said, I gave two things in the MVP article at my Substack. I said, who would, if you voted today, who would win? It has to be Jokic. And I put, what's the ballot going to be by the end of the season? And I have Jokic third because I don't think the Nuggets are going to win enough games.
Yep. And I think that's the way you do it.
Yep. And I think Shea and Luka are going to put up the numbers and have the wins. So
and that's why I think, and that's why I think record does matter. It just doesn't matter in December, because in December, there's not enough games that it's like, come on, guys, come on. There's not enough games for us to factor that in just yet, but we will get there eventually. No super chats today, Matt. Thank you so much for joining us. Hardwood Paroxysm Substack, Locked On Nuggets, Locked On NBA, and of course the Action Network. It's good to be reunited.
Man, I missed you. It was glad to be back with you. Thanks for having me. I was really excited to be on.
And don't think I didn't notice you picking the Nuggets the moment I leave, man. Don't think I didn't take that personally. Now I'm rooting against them all year, just to spite you.
Liar.
Liar. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. Legs is back with us tomorrow. We're going to be breaking down the weekend slate, previewing the final games of the NBA Cup, and talking about the most disappointing players and teams out the gate so far. You can send us comments to let us know what you're thinking on both of those topics. Hit that like button. We'll see you tomorrow.
Silly like the mayor.